My name is Rosemary Ketchum. I use she, her pronouns. I am a transgender woman and a candidate for local office. A lot of folks, that's the first question is, how did you know or when did you know? And for most trans people, there isn't a day or a moment or even an event that kind of triggered, their transition. But it is a feeling of discomfort and awkwardness that you begin to acknowledge and recognize more intently as you grow older. And that was very much my experience. There was no moment I said, you know what, I'm feeling this and this is what it might be. It's never like a movie. It's never so clear cut. And the way I've described it best for people, it's as if you are left-handed living in a right-handed world. And everybody says, no, you can't use your left hand. You have to use your right hand. And everything in the world only works for right hands. And you're like, but it just feels better to use my left hand. I don't understand why people are pressuring me and forcing me to use my right hand when it just feels natural to use my left hand. And for people who are left-handed in a right-handed world, it's awkward. It's like, you have to get special scissors and you have to use, so, being trans, it is a heightened version of that. It's a very crude kind of analogy, but most trans people will describe a kind of sense of awkwardness, and maybe they can't pinpoint it, but they're like, this doesn't feel right. And for me, I behaved more effeminately than my younger brothers and other boys. So I would, I would wear long shirts and belt them as a kid, and I would try on my mom's clothes when she wasn't around, and just those things. And my parents thought it was cute and totally harmless, and they were like, that's whatever. Kids are kids. They're not correcting their behavior because of the world until later. But as I grew older, my parents recognized that those were not just, flippant and things that I just, enjoyed. That was a form of expression for me. And so they began to take it more seriously. I find that most people have a coming out story, or at least want a coming out story for people. And for me, I didn't really have to come out. There's this fantasy, and media and YouTube has kind of promoted this kind of idea where you just, nobody knows and it's your secret, and you sit people down and you're like, here's what's going on. And for some people, that's totally true and valid in the way it happens. But for me, it was very different. It was just, my parents recognized that my expression was different. I recognized it. And my parents thought I was gay first, because even for some trans people, that's the first identity they can kind of grapple onto. And then I think it was 12 or 13 before when my mom put me in therapy. And then that's when our therapist was like, so here's what it is, and gave us the term transgender. I was homeschooled after 4th grade. I had an incident in the boys' bathroom. I was attacked, which is I say it, with a grain of salt, because we were so young and it was just whatever. I can barely remember it, but, another boy had, used a slur and attacked me in the bathroom. I believe it was more of a choking kind of thing. But again, super brief, totally didn't leave marks or anything like that. And that's not to kind of undermine or marginalize attacks, but, it wasn't traumatic for me. And, I didn't tell the teacher, I didn't tell the principal, it wasn't a thing. But another kid who was in the bathroom with us decided to tell somebody. And then that got to my mother, and she was like, we've got to figure this out, because that's often not the last experience like that LGBT or trans people experience in school. So she gave me the decision. She said, you could stay in school and cross her fingers that, it won't kind of get worse, or we could try homeschool. And so I was like, what kid does not want to just stay home all day? So I definitely decided to enter homeschool and give it a try. And it was great. It's a decision I'm so grateful to have given the opportunity to make, and I think it really set me up for success. I was able to focus on my studies and really develop my identity, not having to compare myself to other kids, and be even subject to bullying or, God forbid, assault. In this past year, I've started some work that I think is so very, very important through an organization called Project ID. We are a grassroots organization that help folks attain their most necessary ID documents. So birth certificates, social security cards, marriage licenses, marriage certificates, all in the in the work of getting their official state IDs. And we pay for it all. And for most of us, going to the DMV is just a hassle you have to do every few years or every time you buy a new car or something. But for people who are in poverty or homeless or without the skills and resources to get an ID, it is the biggest obstacle to success. Because good luck getting a job or finding affordable housing or getting a bus pass or any of these things without an ID. So we've helped hundreds of people through this process, and it's kind of a full circle thing because it has to do with identity. And in my life, identity is such an important and key component to my character. I have a story that I tell when I do presentations about my first experience at the DMV, which was just terrible. I'm a teenager, and I go into the DMV, and I'm presenting female, and I had been for years and years and years. And I have all my paperwork together. I call ahead because I want to make sure I don't have to, circle back. And the woman kind of looks at my paperwork and then repeats my name back to me while looking in my eyes, and then repeats my gender back to me to make sure I had it all right. And I was like, mm-hmm. And then she kind of turns around and says, I'll be right back, and goes to get a manager. And the manager comes in and they say, can you come back here with us? And I'm like, what do you mean? And so they kind of guide me to go behind the desk where it says employees only, and they funnel me into a boardroom space, and there are the manager and the clerk and then two other people in suits that I could only really imagine were HR, lawyer, whatever. And they sit me down, and it's all very strange, and I'm already terrified to be there, and it's just so much worse than I imagined. And they sit me down and they say, well, how are you today? I'm like, well, I don't know. Please tell me how I am today. I don't understand. And I could tell they were so uncomfortable and had no idea. And they said, well, we're not going to be able to issue you your ID today. And I was like, okay. And they said, but unless you go to the bathroom and wash your face off, you put your hair back, and then we could, get your ID. And, I could feel I could feel my throat well up and my heart drop, and I was just so uncomfortable. And, I just said, I'm good. I don't need to do any of that. I walked out, and it was a year and a half or 2 years before I had the guts to go back into the DMV. And within that time, a trans friend of mine who lives in West Virginia, I kind of told him this story, and he said, did you bring your gender designation form that the DMV has? I'm like, I don't know what that is. And so he sends me a PDF of this form that the West Virginia DMV has in their files that says, if a person has a gender identity other than the one that, is designated, they can have this form filled out, and then you can have your gender marker changed. And I was so that the DMV had no idea how to do their own job and didn't offer me this paperwork, had no idea it probably even existed. And so I go in, and, it was smooth sailing the second time with that paperwork. That's a kind of a digression from the ID work. And now I go to the DMV multiple times a month, and I see these same people every single week, and they're all kind and wonderful, and I love them. I mean, they're good people. And the problem is that they're trying to, navigate a bureaucratic world that does not match the real world. And when these two things are imbalanced, then, bull occurs, like what happened to me and so many other, trans or gender nonconforming people. I have always had a fascination with civic government, local government. I've always paid attention, and it has mattered so much to me. I never really considered myself to ever be a candidate, but all of that changed in 2016 with the presidential election. And I thought, my goodness, we can't afford to sit back and be complacent. But I still didn't decide to run for office. I just decided that I need to be active in my community. I need to focus on these very important things, and I need to be vocal. I think a lot of folks decide that, caring is enough, and they don't have to kind of step out of their comfort zone to, make a difference, and that's not true. We need people to be on the front lines, using their voice, and that has snowballed into, a campaign for local office, because I thought, I'm doing this really, really important work, helping people in vulnerable communities like our homeless community, people in poverty, folks with mental illness, and I'm doing that as a private citizen and, for the most part, as a volunteer. And, I considered the leverage and the power and the importance of a, elected platform. And in Wheeling, we have so much potential and so much opportunity to make a difference in the lives of everybody who lives within city limits. We have a public housing or affordable housing crisis where, people like me who, want to live in a community that they love, who are working professionals, young working professionals, have a tough time finding a place that is affordable, that is quality, and that is safe. And that's unfair. For me, it's been tough to balance, my experience within the LGBT community and trying not to be pigeonholed, And I find that a lot of LGBT people experience this, especially trans people, where somebody, sees them and they can only imagine them as a trans person in a one-dimensional kind of world. And trans people have so many other components because, of course, we're just people. I don't want to be the trans candidate. It's one of the last things I talk about when I do talk about, issues, because I want people to think of me as a person who cares about housing and public transit and all of these other things. And, if they vote for me just because I'm trans, then so be it. But I hope that, people can kind of dig deeper and understand more about, the community than just their gender identity.